the purpose in me hunting now is not only time outdoors, but I love the challenge. Hunters have to be advocates for the animals that we love, and hunter advocates are usually the reason why we have wildlife. Mental clarity is a big thing too.
Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with Joe Kondelis, founder of the American Bear Foundation, for a conversation about bears, bear conservation, bear ecology, and the role hunting played in his own mental health. So look, if you're somebody who is interested in the role hunting plays in your own personal development, or if you're interested in bears and bear conservation, you're going to want to check out this conversation. It's one I know I enjoyed. Get ready. It's time to enter the Wild Lab. Welcome back to the Wild Lab, everybody. My name's Ned Widener. I'm your host, and today I have a guest that I've been wanting to get on here for quite a while. Joe Kondelis. He is the founder of the American Bear Foundation, which is dedicated to protection and development of bears, bear habitat, and bear hunting across the United States. Joe, how are you today, brother?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure's mine. It's really an honor because I've told you over emails and over the phone the past few weeks or months or however long it's been we've been chatting, that I really appreciate the work that you do, right, with the American Bear Foundation. Because I love bears, and bears are a huge part, and bear hunting is a huge part of what we do at Walker School of the Wild. So anything to help conserve them and conserve habitat, and yeah, I'm all for. So thank you. First off, just thank you for the work that you're doing with that. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, man. I know it's there's not a ton of us that appreciate bears like they should, so it is nice to visit with folks that do, and that's why we're here. We love doing it. We're all cut from the same bear hunting cloth, so like to be out there for folks like you and people that appreciate bears for what they are.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it, man. I want to talk about American Bear Foundation. Obviously, I want to talk about bears, but I kind of want to start with a little bit about you, and a little bit about who Joe is, and like what got you into hunting first off, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what got you into hunting bears as well. So yeah, so why do you hunt, Joe? Tell me that.
Yeah, I think I grew up in Southwest Montana where hunting was definitely. We have places in the country where hunting is cultural. It's not just a hobby. It's like a way of life. And that was where I grew up. My grandpa on my dad's side kind of grew up in the Great Depression, and they had to hunt, to feed their family. And it just kind of carried on. My dad hunted and kind of got me hunting at a very young age. And it's definitely in our family. I would say, it out of my big family, my extended family, I probably hunt more than anyone. But yeah, so hunting was just kind of like, I don't know, that was a rite of passage. You just kind of became a hunter as you started getting old enough to go. And I wasn't too into sports as a kid in junior high and high school. So hunting was just a kind of a natural fit for me because I wasn't super athletic. So I took to the outdoors right away, like as a young kid, and just loved it. And so I kind of have just progressed in my journey from then to now at 45 years old. I'm still as crazy a hunter and outdoorsman as I was when I was that age, for different reasons and different things, obviously, though it changes. But yeah, I grew up hunting in and around Butte, Montana, where I grew up, and kind of stayed there, went to college there, worked there. And then in 2005, my wife and I moved to Cody, Wyoming, which we've just fell in love with this state and this area. It's remarkable, especially if you're into the outdoors. That's pretty tough to beat. So.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good hunting, a lot of good fishing, just a lot of good country up there near Cody.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Big stuff. Not a lot of people. Wyoming is kind of the way the U.S. used to be, so we really like it. Nice and quiet.
Yeah. I'm a fan of it myself. In that answer, I noticed you used the word, hunting as a rite of passage, and I'm curious, what has it taught you?
Well, for me, I think like I look at hunting as just kind of a means to an end. Like
Mm,
time in the outdoors for me is now at my age is like the most important thing. It's not killing something or filling my freezer, although it is great.
yeah.
I don't look at hunting as like, oh, I'm going to fill the freezer. For me, it's just a very easy excuse to get outside. Now, I could go do that at any time without hunting, but I found for me, like having tags in my pocket and a kind of reason to get outside, it doesn't force me, but it gives me more of a laneway to do it because we get old and we get busy and life gets in the way so much as you get older where you kind of almost got to make excuses to have that freedom and that time outdoors.
Mm,
And I found like when I was younger, you just had more time, whether it's kids and jobs and life, it's just life, right? It gets more
mm,
complicated as you get older. And sometimes the things that really are important to us go by the wayside because we're caught up in that rat race. And so I think hunting for me, the mention of hunting is just being outside. Being outdoors for me is everything. I mean,
yeah.
I can just sit on the bank of a river and do nothing for hours, and it gives me
Mm,
peace, and that's what
right.
I need. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you, brother. I mean, it's what I need as well. What though? I'm curious if you can expand on that a little bit. What's different about hunting? As opposed to, I mean, because there's a lot of ways to spend time outdoors, right? Like like I said, you can sit on a river, and that's super important. I love doing that. I do it. I did it this morning, in fact. Um, or you can go bird watching, you can hike, you can rock climb. There's lots of things you can do. So what makes hunting different from that?
I think part of me, and it's taken me some time to figure this out because I reflect upon it a lot. Like, I went from a really big point in time where it was like, man, it was just like, I got to kill things to keep up with everyone else, and this is before social
Mhm,
media. Like, you're not
yeah,
a good hunter unless you fill tags. And then I went from that
mhm,
point to being like, well, really what's important to me is filling the freezer. And now I think for me, I've realized, like, especially with bear hunting, I think is where
mhm,
it's really come to like to the surface for me is challenge. I love
mhm,
I love that. And I think it's that primal thing inside of us that like
mm,
finding game on their turf and outsmarting
mhm,
them to me is more fun than actually pulling the trigger. I get
mhm,
more joy out of that than I do killing anything anymore. And I've really found that with bears. I've killed a lot of bears over the years, and um, I enjoy finding them more than I do killing them. And I think that
yeah,
that's kind of like coming back to that, like what hunting is to me now is different than it was years ago. It's all kind of the same end game, but the purpose in me hunting now is not only time outdoors, but I love the challenge. I like to find hard ways to hunt or do things different, and I like the challenge of it. And then just like I think mental clarity is a big thing too. Just like time outdoors,
mhm,
like when you're out maybe in the timber and it's snowing and it's that November slow coming down snow, quiet in the timber, and you're like on a bull track or a buck track, and you're just like you're so in tune with everything around you, like the world
mm,
disappears. And I need that, and I need that freedom of like kind of that focus on something that is not a stressor. Like it's funny
mhm,
when you don't think about it when you're doing it, but you could get back
right,
and maybe not kill something or just not find what you're after. And you're like, man, I didn't think about anything other than exactly what I was doing. Like you're living in that moment at that time.
yeah,
And that presence is so
right,
important.
yeah. Presence. That's it, man. That's it for me as well. I mean, I totally agree with that. It allows me to be present as like a human, as an animal in an ecosystem, right? And immersed fully within an ecosystem. And I'm with you. Like I don't, I hunt bear, I hunt deer, I hunt a lot of other things, and I don't particularly enjoy pulling the trigger. To be quite honest with
Hmm.
you, it's really not my favorite part of it. But all of the moments up to it, and then also leading after it,
Hmm.
are what I enjoy, right?
For sure.
Because like you said, that's the mental challenge. There's also, I mean, oftentimes a heck of a lot of physical challenge involved in it, um, and it requires me to use skills that maybe I don't necessarily use, in my daily life, like whatever in like if I'm a college professor, so like in the classroom or whatever, I don't necessarily, I'm not just always using my brain, but I'm using like my body, and I'm using my intuition. And I'm using like you said, attunement, skills of
Mhm.
listening and watching and perceiving, right? And that to me, I think is that's what draws me to the sport. And yeah, like you said, bears are a particular challenge. Why are they, I mean, I know why, but can you tell the listeners why are they such a challenge? Like what makes them different than say like an elk or a whitetail or something like that?
Well, I think the biggest one for me that I notice with bears is they're freer thinkers than ungulates are. Because I think
Okay.
deer and elk and moose are a little bit different. They're more like a bear in terms of solitary. Like bears are solitary creatures. They don't live in packs or herds.
Mhm.
Deer and elk are just kind of like, if you can anymore, with elk, as many as there are in some ecosystems, like if you find one, you're going to find a bunch, and they all kind of are like the same, right? They
Mhm.
do the same thing. They're just kind of like this cookie cutter mold of wildlife. And then you have
Mhm.
bears that each bear thinks independently of the other bear, and they all
Mhm.
think differently, and they have personalities. Like
Mhm.
they use the landscape more like humans do as far as their brain goes. I think,
Mhm.
they don't they're not thinking kind of like deer and elk. I think they think a little bit more ahead, bears do, than I think ungulates
Mhm.
do. I think they have a bigger capacity to be forward thinkers and learn. Behavior is huge with bears, so I think it makes
Mhm.
them more challenging to hunt because they learn over the course of their life, and it's important for predators to do that, or they won't be good at what they do.
Yeah.
An ungulate can just, oh, there's grass, I'm going to eat it.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
grass over here, I'm going to eat it. Bears and
Yeah.
cats and different predators have to be always learning every day so
Mhm.
they can stay on top of their game. And I think when you're hunting an animal that is using and thinking like you are, it makes it so much harder. There's not that many of them in terms of numbers when you think of other animals that we hunt either. And so
Mhm.
people are always like, oh, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I'm like, no, it's like finding a needle in a giant hay field sometimes. They
Sometimes.
don't like to
Yeah.
people, they don't like to be seen. They're not
Mhm.
predictable. Like, oh, at dark, they come out of the timber and feed. And then at light,
Mhm.
they go back into the timber.
Right.
None of that lives in the bear world.
Right.
It's just kind
Yeah.
of, it's just such a different species. And I love them. They are so remarkable, and what they are able to do and what they've done. If you look at, since we the settlers landed on the eastern seaboard, and
Mhm.
everyone came over to the west, and we proliferated I can't say that word. We basically took over the west, and
Mhm.
we had all these animals that were on the brink of extinction during that time, the buffalo and everything.
Mhm.
And bears just thrived, man. And since
They
that
have.
time to now, bears are still thriving. It was like, what a
Yeah.
cool, I mean, they're just able to live and do things that they don't get enough credit for. People don't look at them as like as spectacular as they are because they've never been a real big resource concern.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's funny, man. I'm gonna ask you a question that I get asked all the time, and I'm sure you have been asked this question before, but it's very clear that you love bears. I mean, you said it, but even more than that, like in your answer, your passion for them is pretty evident. Why would you hunt them if you love them so much?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question I get a lot. There's a couple reasons. I think for me, an opportunity for me to get out and be around them and learn more. You really learn more about an animal when you're trying to hunt it than you do reading books or anything. So I still am learning today about bears that 5 years ago I thought I knew everything there was to know. That's one reason.
Mhm.
Another reason, just like anything else, we as hunters have to be advocates for the animals that we love, and hunter advocates are usually the reason why we have wildlife. And so, um, because bears are on the landscape, they need to be managed. We live here,
Yeah.
and so we have to manage them, or they become a problem. And I hate when bears get into trouble with trash, and I hate when bears have to get put down because it's a human problem, not a bear problem most of the time. And
Mhm.
so
Sure.
I don't ever want to see bears become which has happened in a lot of areas. They become public enemy number one, and people hate them, you know,
Mm.
and because not because of anything the bear did, but there's food attractants out or that, and so I feel like we have to manage them. And as a hunter of other things, if we go let bears and cats go unchecked on the landscape, then, there's going to be less deer and elk and other things. And so just being able to provide that balance, but like, if we are going to have to hunt bears because of the, what needs to be done to manage and sustain balance, I want to be one of the guys out there doing it. And because I hunt them now, and I tell people all the time, doesn't mean I kill them. Like I enjoy taking people out more than anything now than killing them myself, like we've talked about. So yeah, I think it's kind of a hard thing for me to articulate. I don't know why. Definitely something that I've thought of a lot and more now than I ever used to.
Yeah.
The whole pulling the trigger thing for me, and it might just be a progression of kind of where I'm at in my hunting lifespan. But killing anything anymore is getting harder for me. And it just came out of nowhere. I don't know why or what, but and so I think not like looking at it as killing, but yeah, it's hard. And I often am like, why am I, especially in an area where we live right now in Wyoming, where we don't have a large abundance of black bears. Like in some areas, there's just so many, it kind of makes sense, right? And then there's areas here. I killed a bear a couple of years ago that was 16 years old, that lived in grizzly country its whole life, scarred up, big old boar. I mean, he's the biggest black bear I've ever killed, and that one weighed on me. I was like, why am I the one that got to take its life? Like, why me? That
Yeah.
thing was just eating in a grassy meadow in this bottom, and I found him, and I knew where to go, and I got lucky. And he went through all his life like trying to survive, and then I just come along. Like, that stuff
Yeah.
bothers me sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, because it bothers me as well. I mean, but I don't want the podcast to revolve around this, but I am curious, like how I don't know, like, and maybe you don't have an answer to this, but I want to ask the follow up question, like, how do you deal with that? Like, because there's a tremendous weight. I always tell people when we kill something, a bear, a deer, it really doesn't matter what it is. There's a tremendous weight to it, right? Because that bear
Hmm.
has, like you said, like it's we can talk about like the way Aldo Leopold puts it, right? Which is like the bear is the mountain, right? Where the
Hmm.
wolf is the mountain, the deer is the mountain, and a part of that ecosystem lives in that bear, and so a part of that ecosystem is dying when you kill it. I'm just curious. I don't know if like how yeah what that means to you or how you kind of deal with that weight of things.
For me, I think what I've kind of like found helps me deal with that is the utilization of the animal and showing respect, right? Like,
Mm,
I'm not killing it just because, and this is a big thing that I get frustrated with, is especially with predator hunters. And I wouldn't even
mm,
call them predator hunters. They're just hunters, like guys that kill animals and then they justify the death of that animal to save another one. It's like, so
right.
you only killed that black bear to save a deer fawn. Like, that's the only reason you
Mm,
were bear hunting. And I don't look at killing anything like that. I don't look at, well, I killed an elk, so I saved a farmer's, hay bale or fence. I look
no.
at it in terms of, I killed a bear. I killed one of the most iconic species in the West or in the United States that represent wildlife. And like, how am I going to respect it and make sure that his
Mhm,
life wasn't taken in vain for my glory? Like, that's where I think people are stuck with hunting as personal glory. So trying to diminish that and really prop up the animal for what it's worth, like utilizing the meat, utilizing the hide, utilizing the fat, everything you can on it. And then when you talk about it, showing some reverence and respect to the animal and not saying,
mhm.
oh yeah, it's probably a calf killer or whatever. I killed it, and whatever. Like, that to me is part of what's wrong with hunting anymore,
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. You're saying like a image wise, you're saying that's part of what's wrong with hunting.
Yeah, the
Is that right?
optics. And even though that is correct, like bears kill fawns, bears kill calves,
Mm-hmm.
they kill whatever, they're predators.
Mm-hmm.
But like focusing on that being the reason, it's almost like you're trying to justify it to yourself when you do that. Like I kind of feel bad
Right.
for killing a bear, so I'm going to say like I saved an elk fawn or an elk calf
Mm-hmm.
by doing so, and it'll make me
Yeah.
feel better. Like no, just be okay with. You took a great animal off the landscape. You got a whole bunch of resources now. Like using, going more into that rather than justifying it for something else. And I think that's what's helped me is like we use the meat, we use the hides, we use all
Mm-hmm.
the animal, and we process our own. So it's like we can do it how we want it. And I think if I ever got to a point where I was just killing things, like I'll never be there. I think there was a part of me that was like that when I was a kid. You know, we'd go shoot squirrels and go, you know, whatever, just
Mm-hmm.
kill stuff. We're killers, you
Right.
know, young kids. And I'm so different than that now. Like I avoid hitting rabbits on the road because I don't want to see something die
Yeah.
senselessly. Like I want to be
Yeah.
able to use
Yeah.
it like our ancestors did. They didn't go out and kill just for fun. They killed
Yeah.
because they needed to live.
No, totally, totally. And I asked that question because I think it's really important to kind of the work that we do, and also like I see it, and I've brought this up many times on the podcast with other hunters and with non-hunters alike as well. But like, there's a part of our society, and I think it speaks to what you're saying. Like, part of the reason why people, might give a different reason for feel bad about killing something that they're hunting, and then give us a different reason for it, like that's a calf killer or whatever, or a fawn killer or whatever. um but like I'll tell you a story. I was in the California mountains the other day near a resort town, and I was driving home, and there were two ducks. One duck had been killed on the side of the road, and the other duck was like gravely wounded, clearly injured in the middle of the road. And people were just swerving around it. They were just driving around this duck on the middle of the road. And I it like broke my heart to watch all these people, probably like 20 cars in a row, just driving around, driving around, driving around. And I so it was a mountain road. I couldn't like stop right in the middle of it, but I drove down a little ways to where there was a turn off, and I got out of my car, and I took both ducks, and I killed the other duck, and then I actually put them in my truck, and ended up harvesting the meat. But it spoke to me because it kind of highlights what you're saying, is that like we don't want to, sometimes even hunters don't necessarily sometimes want to confront the reality of what we're actually doing. And I
Yep.
think it's really, really important to confront the reality of it, which is why you use the word killing a lot, which is appropriate. And sometimes other people, they will use the word harvesting or something like that, which I think sometimes distances us from the actual act that we're actually taking to life. So anyways, yeah, I just want to appreciate your philosophy on that.
I think just the last kind of little point on that too, to me is, you know, we have ego, and I think ego ties into a lot of the
Mhm.
macho ness of hunting, and it's hard for people to let that ego go and the macho ness and have
Mhm.
some sensitive feelings about it because we as hunters are never propped up as being the most sensitive people on the planet, even though a bunch of
Sure.
us are. So I think that
Sure.
whole image and mystique of hunters and outdoorsmen and outdoors women is like, oh, we're rugged and tough and we don't have feelings, and it's like, no, I definitely do,
Mm.
man. And like, I, it's
Yeah.
it's a cool thing about my daughter hunting now too, because like she's in a different space than I am in terms of, kind
Mhm.
of her mental, the way she handles hunting versus the way I do. And she's eager to
Mm.
fill tags and, fill the freezer, and means I don't have to shoot as many critters if I don't want to because she's
Mhm.
feeding us. So
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, because we there hunters have feelings as well. Yes, and
yeah,
it's not just like you said, some ego driven, and it can be definitely. But I
yeah.
think if done the right way, it's not just some ego driven act. So you said, and I want to just because it was something you said prior to when we jumped on, but to sort of expand on the idea of, yeah, you have a lot of emotions. You said that hunting had helped get you through some really hard times, emotionally, or at least mentally. I
Yeah.
wonder if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it sure did. And a big part of that whole ego and macho ness and toughness of men. I remember,
Mm,
I mean, anyone that's gone through it will remember dates and times and the smells specifically. But, in
mm,
college, we were out hunting, and this had been back in like 2001 or so. We were on an archery hunt, me and my buddies, time of our lives, college, having fun hunting. And I just had something happen to me that I could not explain. Like the whole world was coming
mm,
down on me and I didn't know what it was. And, buddies raced me back to town. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Like I was almost hysterical and, get me back to the house and sleep it off for a couple of days. You'll be fine. And that's kind of what it was until
mm,
2009. I had that same feeling and it was hunting. And I was like, what is going on? I don't understand this. I ended up going to the doctor, to the ER, because I came home. We'd killed 2 elk and just had this like impending sense of doom and fear. And like the whole world was crashing down. And I'm usually like this most light, easygoing, chill dude. And I was just like, I don't understand what's going on. I went to the doctor and she was like, oh, dude, you probably had a panic attack. I'm like, why? Why would I have
mm.
one of those? Like, I'm out hunting. This is what I love. And she's like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Right.
kind of that's what you get when you go. And um, so I kind of went down this road from '09 to probably 2012 of trying to figure out why. So after that one, they continually started happening more and more. And I would get these horrible
Mm,
panic attacks. And one thing that was even getting worse was my fear of the panic attacks was causing constant anxiety and nerves and stress and more panic attacks. So like you just start,
mm,
one thing adds to another and you're just building this giant snowball. And unless you really can kind of figure it out and understand it, you don't get out of that. And so I was to that point and you go to the doctor and they give you meds, and I probably tried 3 or 4 different meds, and then I would take myself off them because they weren't working or they'd make it worse. And then that would make it worse, and so you're
mm,
messing with the
mm,
chemicals in your brain at that point and, trying to take care of it on your own. And I tell you what ended up probably saving me from anything was 2 things. I went and I personally just was like, I can't be a good husband and a father and a business
mm,
partner and a person even going this way. Like I was like,
mm.
it sounds so wrong with me. I'm going to end up in a home or something. And I went and found a
Right.
therapist and went to therapy for 3 years, early on, twice
Mm,
a week, and that's a hard thing for a mid 20s year old. I was late in my 20s, early 30s to just be like, yeah, I go see this
mm,
guy, and he
mm,
would gone through a lot of the same stuff I did and made me not feel like a psychopath, and basically got like
yeah.
through that. And then like figuring out what things were triggering me. It's a bunch of different things, but like one of my biggest triggers was lack of control. So I have
Mm,
definitely have like some OCD tendencies, and I like to have things go exactly the way they should in my head. And when they don't go that
mm,
way, my brain doesn't like that. And so realizing that
mm,
those are triggers for me, and a lot of times that's out hunting, out in the outdoors, big storms
mm,
rolling in. What are you going to do? Or this happened. This is not
mm,
what I had laid out in my brain. And so
mm,
understanding it was probably 50% of the cure, like just knowing, oh,
mm,
okay, I'm not. And then, more time outdoors and exposing myself to things like that. But I really got to the point where I was afraid to go outside, almost to the point, because those were triggers, to now I try and put myself in craziest positions I can, because I almost like that
mm.
challenge of like, but it was really rewiring my brain to what things
Sure.
to make you. And when I had spoke before about, you're tracking a bull or a bear in the snow, and it's you in that track. Like you can
Mm,
release your nothing. You don't have anxiety and panic. Like you're not even thinking about that. Like, you need that free time for your brain to heal. And I think so much of that in the outdoors, time spent outside, is that for me. Like, it, even to this day, like, it's been so long, like, I don't have the issues. I don't even, like, it's almost like a different life I lived for a while, because it's so different now. But like, I know it's because I spend a lot of time outside, and I give my brain time to, like, get away from stress, and just focus on one thing at a time, and really be focused on being present in the moment. And that has been, I mean, crucial in my mental health, for sure.
Yeah. Wow, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's really important, because I think it's a when, especially for us, especially as men. I think a lot of times, I mean, I know that your story resonates with me, like, because I spent years struggling with mental health and suicidal ideation and lots of things, and it wasn't just hunting, but it was hunting and fishing and the outdoors that absolutely, like
Hmm.
you said, helped me rewire my brain, helped me get back to my more primal self, and yeah, helped me learn to love and appreciate myself. So I really appreciate that, and I think it's, like I said, it's really important to the work that we're doing here as well, because a lot of men come to us with lack of purpose, then have no, like you said, maybe going through a lot of mental health issues, but have no idea why or have no idea how, but have some inclination that there's some sort of medicine or there's something in nature for them that can provide some help. So to hear somebody like you, who's a very accomplished hunter, very accomplished businessman, talk about that, I think that's yeah, that's very, very helpful, and I think a lot of people can learn from it. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I try and, like, I definitely went through a time, you were probably the same way, where it's like a big secret, like, you don't want people to
Oh,
know. And
sure.
then I reached a point where I was like, well, maybe I went through all that for a reason. Like, maybe my goal
Hmm.
now, or my purpose now, is one person that comes by that's going through it, I can help them and say, like, dude, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, I was there, and
Yeah.
it is going to be okay. But, like, having peers, good people around you, helps. And then just advocating for yourself, man. Like, no one's going to fix you. And you have
Yeah.
to be willing to put in the time and the effort. But having things in groups like you're doing, and that's why I'm big with, like, our veteran hunts and taking people hunting, because, like,
Yeah.
a tiny little thing that I can provide someone that's part of my, like, routine might change their life. And that's
Yeah.
everything, you know?
Absolutely. Tell me about the veteran hunts you do. What do you do?
Yeah. So through the Bear Foundation, we try and do like one or two veteran hunts a year. And most of the
Yeah.
time we've had some pretty severe, um, not disabled vets, but in terms of, like, combat experience, and seen some rough
Hmm.
stuff. One of them, Doc,
Hmm.
he was a combat flight medic, and he's seen some of the worst things you could imagine, and took him out to get a bear. And one thing he told me, he was like, dude, I was circling the drain, and then you just called. And I didn't know him from Adam, and I got his name from another group that we work with that helps identify hunters that might want to go bear hunting. And I just called him one day. I was like, hey, dude, you want to go on a bear hunt? And he's like, I don't even know who you are.
Hmm.
I'm like, don't matter. And so became
Yeah.
lifelong friends with him. But he's like, man, it saved me. And I was like, just a little bear hunt? He's like, you have no idea what some of us, and the last few that we've taken and done, I just kind of do them on my own with the foundation. Not a big thing. We don't get crazy. We just go bear hunting. And they've all just said how much it gives them something to look forward to. And then, just the camaraderie of being around like-minded people and stuff like that's really helpful. And I think next, not
Hmm.
this year coming up, but the year after, we're actually going to have a camp where I'm going to bring in all the guys that have hunted with me before as mentors for new veterans. And
Hmm.
we're just going to host a big camp and just chill, wall tents, do some bear hunting, and, like, have these guys be able to be around each other. And, just kind of, like, I think that's a big help for them, is time away, and just being able to maybe talk to someone that was in their same position, or someone that wasn't, but it's
Yeah.
those little things. That's why hunting and the outdoors is so cool, because we can do stuff like that. Like, we take
Yeah.
for granted how much it's easy for you and I to jump out our back door and go bear hunting, and we do it. It's our way of
Sure.
life, but that to someone
Yeah.
else might be life changing.
Yes, yeah, that's super cool, man. I didn't realize you guys were doing that. We're running a bear camp for vets this summer, not this summer, this fall as well.
Nice.
Um, yeah, so we have about 7 guys coming out and
That's so
teach
badass.
them how to track and teach them some things about bear hunting. And like I said, and it'll be our first. We've done a camp like this before, but this will be our first time for just for vets, and I'm super excited about it. So
Good.
it's gonna
I
be
get more out
cool.
of it
Yeah.
than they probably do.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's truth in that
Yeah.
for sure, man. Well, tell me more about the American Bear Foundation, man. Like what? Yeah, in the introduction I said what it is, but why did you start it? Like, what was the impetus for the American Bear Foundation?
Yeah, it was really like when I moved to Wyoming, and I grew up in southwest Montana, and definitely bear hunting in areas where we had some decent densities of black bears. It wasn't crazy. And this was really before the grizzly bear issue has gotten to the point it is now. So, you would go out
Mm,
bear hunting in the spring and you'd see a bunch of black bears, and it was like, okay, this is bear hunting. And then I moved to Wyoming
mhm,
and I was like, okay, bear hunting is my thing. I got to figure this out down here, and they have some bait areas in Wyoming, but I'm an old school spot and stock guy. So that's what I wanted to figure out. And,
mhm,
I would just hunt around here. I'm like, geez, all I see are freaking grizzly bears. Is there any black bears around here? And, you call
mhm,
around and you ask, and not a lot of people know. And I'm like, well, what's the bear density? So I don't really know, So it seemed like there was not a lot of information out there. And then, at the same time, it's still pretty early in my journey of a bear hunter and trying to learn, and bear hunters are a funny bunch. They're like trappers, it's really hard to find a mentor in
mhm.
bear hunting that's going to show you,
Yeah, for sure.
because they're going
Yeah.
to have to take you to their spot. And that's a whole big thing. And I was like,
Mhm.
man, there's just nothing out there for guys that want to learn how to bear hunt. And so for me, it was like, man, it'd be cool if there was like a group that could do a lot of that stuff, maybe like the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for bears. And, I was just like, the only people that are going to advocate for these studies and for help and trying to figure this stuff out is going to be an NGO, really, because you just have a
Mhm.
louder voice. So that was kind of why we started, wanted to be out there, a group that was representing bear hunters and out there looking out for bear hunters. But on the other side of the
Mhm.
coin, definitely wanted to promote more work for black bears to ensure that there was black bears on the landscape. And then I'd say a huge part of why we started was to do what we could as sportsmen to delist a grizzly bear in the GYE and the NCDE, the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, because we are seeing it living
Mhm.
here, how bad it's gotten. And so, yeah, that's kind of why we started. And I'd say most of our work nowadays is hunter advocacy and then research. We spend a lot of money on black bear and bear research,
Mhm.
which is what we
Mhm.
wanted. We've gotten some cool studies, and conflict's a big one. We do spend a lot of money on conflict, areas where bears are getting in trouble. We try and prevent that and do what we can,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's kind of like the top elevator pitch on why we started.
Right on. What sort of what sort of research besides bear conflict or maybe even bear conflict? What are you working on right now? What's on the
So
top
there's some
priority list right
stuff.
now?
Yeah, right now conflict's huge. I think as far as research goes right now, there's some major issues out on the eastern seaboard with mange, sarcoptic mange, and bears
Mm,
in Virginia are
mhm,
they're losing a lot of bears in Virginia. We've tried to get involved out there and help out with some money, and it's each department in every state is different in how they do it, and we've had some struggles getting money out there to them. They are starting to do some work though, and sometimes it's not spending money; it's just bringing the problem ahead and keeping it in front of
mhm,
the people that can make those decisions. So I know our Virginia chapter out there has been just like beating down the doors with this mange issue. And then, we've really done a lot of work in advocating for black bear studies in high density grizzly areas. So kind of a unique
mhm,
situation that we have in the lower 48 is we have two apex predators living on the landscape that at one time there was a few of one and a bunch of the other. Now there's getting to be a bunch of
mhm,
the big one. And how are they affecting the other one? How are this many grizzly bears on the landscape
mhm,
affecting black bears? It's not Alaska. Wyoming and Montana don't have the resources on the landscape for bears to, kind of coexist on the same hillside, and you don't see that. where a black bear and a grizzly bear are going to be on the same hillside. They definitely don't. And so trying to get some research done on that, and it'll kind of piggyback off of some of the population work we've done in Wyoming. And the problem is in that instance is we don't have a baseline for grizzly bear or for black bear usage of those areas prior to high grizzly densities. Oh, I lost you again.
Right.
Hey, babe. Yeah, so like not having a baseline, but just starting somewhere is important because, anecdotally, anyone that hunts in the grizzly use areas and the heavy grizzly density areas are not seeing the black bears. They probably should, but we don't know. There's never been work done to understand it, and so that is our big push in the next few years. Also, like many states do not have a great idea of how many black bears they have. They just know they have them and they
Right.
estimate counts. And so we did a really cool study in Wyoming where we did like a several year study collaring bears in different mountain ranges, and then using that collar data to put out hair collection sites, and blanketing the landscape with collection sites so we could get hair from bears, and then try and get individual DNA so the models are more accurate for population and they're not just using harvest data. So it's been really cool. They're using it in some other states now. And so like, just being a part of that, we had a grad student with the University of Wyoming doing a lot of work. We partnered with Wyoming Game and Fish, and they've been so eager to do bear work. But the problem we have and we find is in the West, in the upper Rockies, especially Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, most of the money that is needed to do black bear work is being spent on grizzly management. And so black bears don't have a lot of money. So they need a group like us to come in and say, if you can do this, we'll provide money, because most of the biologists and stuff in these departments want to do the work. They're just like, we have no money. It all goes to this or it all goes to that.
Yeah.
Black bears are not a resource concern, so we're not spending money on it.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know that a lot of states, I mean, I know I live in California and we just had our 10-year study come out this
Yeah.
past year, right? Which was a pretty extensive study, and I've talked to a lot of biologists that were a part of that study, and it's only now that I'm realizing that like states like Idaho and Wyoming and maybe Montana don't necessarily have the funds, as you're saying. That's why they don't have the studies to come out. Because I mean, yeah, and so these estimates on bears that they have on black bears are probably really old and probably really inaccurate. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yes. I think
No,
some
no.
of the
Yeah.
studies are like 90s, and so it's a different world we live in. And so even if you look
Yeah.
back, some of them you can find, you're like, oh my gosh. Or it was done on a little tiny mountain range somewhere by a grad student that
Mhm.
was just trying to get their master's, and it's like it doesn't reflect the entire population and or the current situation that we live in. I think
Yeah.
pretty glaring was the California, which we have a chapter there. We follow very closely with what's going on. And, when they came
Right.
out and they're like, oh, now we have an estimated 60 to 80,000 bears in the state. When before it was like
Right.
this, they're like, holy shit, that's a lot of bears,
Yeah.
And so, but I also look, there's a little more money, I think, where they're able to do some work in California. I mean, you guys have more bears than, I mean, it's crazy.
Well, at least that's what the studies say, that we have more bears than anywhere. And
Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe we do. I know when I was when I've been hunting in Idaho and I've been tracking bear and just looking for bear sign or whatever, I do tend to see a lot more in my own backyard in California. Like it's hard for me to not go for a hike somewhere and not see some sort of bear sign, whether it's scat or a bite tree
Yeah.
or whatever it happens to be. It's hard for me to not go for a hike and not see some sort of bear sign. Where and I know those woods in here a lot better than I do in some other states. But yeah, but I tend to see a lot more bear sign here than I have seen other places. And
Well,
part
when
and
you look
maybe
at
that's numbers.
It's number, but I think you look at like the harvest data every year in California, and it doesn't change much. So you got the same
Yeah.
amount of people hunting and killing
Right.
bears, and it doesn't go up, and the population of humans and bears is going up. It's like we're just taking the
Yeah.
same amount out, and so eventually, and with the ecosystem and the climate and everything, it lends itself to for species to do well. And the problem in
Right.
California is we're just running into, bears are pushing out. The bucket is full in certain areas. So now you got bears in places
Yeah.
where they shouldn't be, and then they become,
Hmm.
an issue. And that's what sucks. And, we have, unfortunately, we have areas in the West where we just don't even have an idea what we have for black bears. They'll just put out an estimate, and it's just off of harvest data alone. Which, yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay, but it's not going to be that accurate of a count.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what would you say is the biggest conservation concern facing, we'll say black bears, not necessarily grizzlies, but what's the biggest conservation concern facing black bears in the West? If it's
Uh,
mange back east.
yeah, I think out west is probably going to be eventually, just the human sprawl. I think is going to be a
Uh-huh.
big part of
Yeah.
it, because as we sprawl into new areas, we're taking away landscape from them that they use, and we're going to end up having to remove more bears out of the ecosystem because of conflict, and so I think sprawl,
Sure.
uneducation. So we saw during COVID a huge push of people from the coasts out into the Rockies, like Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. And those people
Yeah.
don't understand how to live with wildlife. And so when they get out
Hmm.
here and they buy a house and there's trash everywhere, bears get into it and they figure out, okay,
Sure.
then the bear has to get killed. So we have a bunch of people moving out west that don't know how to live and recreate and respect wildlife. I think that's a big, big, big problem. Um, and then I
Hmm.
think, honestly, one of our biggest issues going forward is going to be the hunting community, and not necessarily, there's a small part of it that are so anti-predator. We saw it in Wyoming legislation this year. They tried to pass a bill that would give every single person, back in the day they did this. Every single person with an elk
Hmm.
tag would have got a bear tag. So that's about
Hmm.
60 to 70,000 bear tags they would have put out for a state that doesn't have
Hmm.
8,000 bears. So I think we
Right.
have this very big anti-predator sentiment in part of the hunting community
Hmm.
and the ag
Yeah.
community. And it was a tough
Yeah.
fight. Like, it almost got out of I mean, we were pretty worried about it. And, if one of those bills goes through and all of a sudden you just see predators being decimated because they're, causing issues with ag or, whatever else, that could be a major issue. And
Hmm.
that comes from within. There was actually hunters
Sure.
supporting that. And there was a bunch of people that loved to chase cats and hunt bears that were like, whoa, 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 we don't want this, because like we love the animal. We want to hunt them for a long time. We don't want it to be this, and they don't rebound like deer and elk do. It takes some time for
Sure.
predators to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say that. It's not the answer that I was expecting, but it makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, there's historically in the United States or North America at least, there's been a pretty large anti-predator sentiment. I mean, we used to drop poison meat out of airplanes all across the West, right?
Yep.
To just indiscriminately poison wolves, bears, lions, but and obviously it got a lot of other things as well. Um, and oftentimes that doesn't necessarily come from a conservation perspective, right? So oftentimes that comes from more of an ideological perspective, or just this othering of this predator. Well, we want more ungulates, or we want to save our cattle, or whatever it happens to be. But it doesn't necessarily come from a conservation perspective. And so what I'm hearing you say is that you at American Bear Foundation, especially, and correct me if I'm wrong, is bear conservation is number one. I
Yeah.
mean, is that what you got? Yeah, number one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so important for us. Like, we want to leave a legacy. We want to leave it so, like, I mean, and this is so simple, but like we want future generations of hunters to be able to enjoy bears and hunt bears, and and ultimately, like, we're for all bears. It's not just hunting. So like, if you don't hunt, we want to be able to do what we can so that you can go out and take pictures of bears. Like, we want them on the landscape for the future. And that looks like a bunch of different things. Sometimes it's us not supporting a bill that's going to be for almost the eradication of a species. And then sometimes it's us going against, the state game commissions because they want to close hunting seasons. It's a fine line, because, you look in Washington, they ended their spring bear season essentially. And if that commission had their druthers, they would close bear hunting altogether, which would be devastating to the bears there, because there's so many already and they're already a problem. And so, like, creating hunter opportunity and keeping hunter opportunity is crucial for us, but not doing so that we are going to kill off a species. So balance, just having that balance.
I hear you. I wonder if you could unpack a little bit, because I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that necessarily all the listeners, because we have a lot of hunters that listen, but also a lot of non-hunters. And so I wonder if you can unpack a little bit, like, what is the role of hunting in conservation, especially when it comes to bear? Because you just said it in that answer right there. So maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, hunting is definitely just a tool that the wildlife managers can use to keep species in check. So, because I say this all the time, because we live on the landscape, we now have a responsibility to manage wildlife. Now, if we weren't here, wildlife would not care and it'd take care of itself. But because we live here in all their spaces, we have to manage it. Like, there's no way around it, because if we didn't, we'd have a situation like Durango, Colorado, where there's bears just roaming town. They don't want to manage them. And that's not safe for bears. And what bear wants to be a dumpster bear? Like, I can't imagine what a shitty life, So, like, I think because we can hunt bears, they use that as a management tool to manage for balance. So if bear numbers go left unchecked, there'll be too many bears. And that is going to swing the pendulum one way. And when you do that, you're going to take away from something else. And so you not only in places like Washington will have more timber damage, you'll have more crop damage, you'll have more issues with ungulates, and so, okay, now we got to swing it back the other way. And if you go too much one way, then you have no bears to manage all the ungulates, because they need to be managed too at a higher level than we are killing them as hunters. Like, it's the balance changed when we got here. Really, it did, because animals balance themselves fine, and there would be ebbs and flows. But then we get in, and now all of a sudden you got three things in the equation, and it makes it tougher. And so it's a very fine line that the managers use, the biologists and the game managers use. Normally, when they're using science to do it, it's okay. Where we see this issue is, like you said before, the ideology of one thing or another comes into play and starts swinging things one way or another. That's the wrong direction or for the wrong reason. Like, wildlife should only be managed using science, not my perspective on it. Like, if it were up to me, things would be a lot different, because I'm such a big bear guy. But that's not the right way, That's my own belief, But, like, science should be the end all be all, and they have to be managed. They can't go left unchecked, just like deer and elk can't either. And then you get disease. You get too much wildlife of one thing in one area, and you get disease. They start having issues like we're seeing in Virginia, where there were so many bears in Virginia at one point. Their population skyrocketed over the years. And then they're living in such high densities that once you get something, it's hard to get it out of the population, because there's such high densities. So Mother Nature comes in and is like, well, there goes your bear population. We don't want to see that. So that's why we manage wildlife. That's why hunting is such an important factor in it. And, I always try and tell people, like, a lot of species were at the point of extinction not too long ago. And when they started managing wildlife and they started developing game and fish, wings of the government, and having game wardens on there and started selling tags, they created hunter advocates. So a hunter is never going to let something they love to pursue be erased from the landscape. And so hunter advocates are the biggest thing right now, I think, for resource health.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, it's especially with, and this is a slightly different topic, but it's related. Especially with a lot of the public land fights that we have currently in this day and age. Hunters are huge advocates for that. Yeah, I think it's often, I think sometimes people see it as an oxymoron, where it's like, which is why I asked you the question to earlier on in the podcast. How can you kill something you love? How can you hunt something you love? Right. But that brings it back to it, is that, well, we're advocates for wildlife, we're advocates for conservation, advocates for public lands, and all of these things. Um, yeah. So I want to be mindful of your time and all of this, Joe. And I really appreciate you sitting down with us and talking today, brother. Um, I want to, if there's one thing that you wish people knew about bears, about bear hunting, or even maybe the American Bear Foundation, what would you wish people knew?
I think the biggest thing that not a lot of people know because they see an NGO and they think, okay, I know how this goes, but we're all volunteer. So we started in 2007 as the Yellowstone Country Bear Hunters Association, and then quickly changed to the Western Bear Foundation, and then more recently the American Bear Foundation. So we have grown from being a little regional nonprofit to being a national nonprofit and having state chapters, and we've
Mm,
done it all and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by being all volunteers still, and so that is
mm,
something that I think is so cool. I'm so proud of that still. Now, I don't know if that model can be sustained with how big we're getting, but for right now, like when people spend money or give money or donate or become a member, like your money is going back to bears and bear hunting. And so that is one of the
yeah,
coolest things to me. One of the things I'm most proud of. It also means if you're involved, you're in it for the right reasons because you're not getting paid.
yeah, right, yeah, sure, sure. Well, yeah, I appreciate that, man. I mean, and like I said, it's bears are a big part of my life. I mean, and they're
Yep.
they're like I do love to hunt them, but just as much, if not more, sometimes I love to go out. Like, it's not season in California right now, but I still go out pretty regularly and track bears and watch bears and just watch what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like the other day I watched a sow and a boar chasing a sow through this field, and I mean they were very, very close. They didn't they just watched me and were like, "Hey, look, we're doing our thing. I'm doing your thing," and I probably watched them for a good hour just sitting there with my binoculars and outside the truck. It was just a really beautiful, wonderful experience.
That's what I
And
love.
so yeah,
They don't
just
I don't think they get enough credit. Like people don't we're blessed because we've been able to see bears and observe them. There's a huge part of the country and the population that have never seen a bear even. It's like
yeah,
everyone's seen a deer,
yeah,
but like, and I think the more people that actually get to experience bears will find a greater appreciation for them. Like, just watching them is fascinating. Like, they're way cooler to watch than an
mhm,
elk standing in a meadow eating grass. I just, you know,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, not to create a hierarchy or anything, but I do agree. Yeah, and it's interesting. I live kind of, well, I live close to Tahoe and also Mammoth Lakes, and both of them have a very large black bear population. And like you said, it's both of those towns, bears become almost. I mean, they're the last study that I saw, which is a little bit older now, was something like 10 times more bears in and around Tahoe and Mammoth Lakes than there are in the backcountry.
Mhm.
So there's that many more bears, and they do create a problem. And like you say, the thing that I really hate seeing, and it happens every year, and in some of these small mountain towns where I live, is that a bear will get into a trash, or a bear will become a problem bear for whatever reason, be labeled as a problem bear, right? And be put down by the Department of Fish and Game, and not to chastise CDFW because they're doing their job, right? But we're talking about respect and reverence for the animal. Um, I don't like to see that because I don't think that's the most respectful and
No.
reverential way to treat
Mhm.
bears. You know what I mean?
It breaks my heart, and
And so,
it's
yeah.
a great reason again why we need to manage. So humans basically ruin everything. So because we're on that space and there's so many bears, we can't harvest the bears like we should in that area. So then we have to have problem bears.
Mhm,
And then problem bears, people don't
mhm,
want them to be killed, so they just end up being bigger problem bears and they end up just getting killed. And it's like you can't
yeah.
have your cake and eat it too. Like if you want to live here and have no bears, then we need to hunt them, or you need to be an adult and responsible and put your freaking trash away and be bear proof your house. You know, you're living in one of the best ecosystems for bears to exist. You know, you're going to have bear
Mhm,
problems. And that's, you understand it. But
mhm,
like to me, the worst thing in the world is seeing, I just saw a clip of a bear the other day in downtown LA, and it was just a giant. And I'm like, man, that breaks my heart. Like, what a cool bear. And like, I doubt that bear wants to be strolling through a burnt out part of the city, you know, or something like that. Or bears that get
mhm.
whacked in Tahoe. I'm like, gosh dang, man. I want to see a hunter get it, you know, that's going to appreciate it, or that bear not have to be relying on human food because there's too many bears around. They got to go find other food sources, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, it's a hard way it's a hard life for a bear in a city for sure. I would
Yeah.
imagine. I'm not a bear, but I'm imagining being one in the city, and I'm not sure that's where I would want to be if I was a bear.
No.
Oh man. Well, okay. I do have another question that I want to ask you because, and this is actually maybe a personal question, but I really want to know what your favorite bear recipe is.
So mine right now is burnt ends, bear burnt ends. So kind of this
Okay.
thing I made up. It wasn't off a bear brisket, but we butcher our own, and I had some bear roasts in the freezer, and I was like, it was last year we were having some people over, and I was like, I wonder if I could make like, I really just had a craving for brisket and burnt ends. I'm like, you know, bears got a little bit of fat in their meat, you know, a little more than like a deer and elk. It shouldn't dry out as long as, I wonder if I could make burnt ends out of just a chunk of roast on the hind.
Hmm.
And so I did it, and it turned out fantastic. Like it was a perfect cut for that. Like it was just a big chunk of meat off the hind. And what I did, I smoked it to like 160 in the trigger. And then once it got to
Hmm.
160, I took it out and I cubed the whole thing into little cubes. And then I cooked it just like you would burnt ends from a brisket, you know, barbecue sauce, butter, brown
Hmm.
sugar. Threw it back in there for like 2 hours, and they came out and they were just like brisket. And everyone ate them, and they're like, I can't believe this is freaking bear. I was like, man, I have one more roast left from my bear 2 years ago, and I'm like, that's got to get used. And I didn't get one this spring, so yeah, I think right now that is my number one. It was always Scotch eggs. I love Scotch eggs, and so I'd make a ton of bear
Hmm.
sausage and make Scotch eggs with it. And yeah, but
Yeah.
burnt ends,
Yeah.
you know, just cubing it up. And, you know, if you make a roast, you can do so many things with it. And I just found that one was like, it was a big hit. And I love it. I love barbecue. So,
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, that sounds good. And it's always it's every time that I serve bear to most of what I eat is actually bear. It's my primary source of protein. It has been for the past few years. And every time that I serve it to somebody, they're always surprised at how delicious it is, especially like canned
yes,
bear. I think canned bear is just like one of the, and it sounds gross and it doesn't even look that
I've
appetizing,
eaten canned
but
fish, canned meat. Yeah, it's.
yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you for trying to teach people about how good it is, because there's a huge misconception in a lot of places that bear is
Mm,
trash and it's no good. And, you know, hell, in
yeah.
Wyoming, we don't even have to take it out of the field. So that's
Oh, is
another
that right?
big
I didn't know
issue.
that.
Yeah, it's a huge
Okay.
optics issue. It just makes bear hunters look like hide
Mm,
hunters. So
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that, but yeah,
me neither.
use every part for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate you sitting down with us, brother. If people want to find you, how do they want to find the American Bear Foundation? How do they get a hold of you, man? Where should they
Yeah.
look?
So we just launched a new website. It's AmericanBearFoundation.org. And then we have Facebook, Instagram, just under American Bear Foundation. And then my personal stuff's all out there. when you call the number on the website or you send an email, that's to me. So we're very kind of grassroots, and if you need to get a hold of me, you can reach out on the website or on the number on there, or through my social media or the Bear Foundation social media.
Right on. Thanks, brother. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, I love what you're doing with the Bear Foundation and with the vets. So thanks for sitting down with me, brother.
Thanks, Ned. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks for listening to The Wild Lab. If today's conversation stirred something in you and you're ready to connect to your own inner wildness, then check us out online on Instagram at Step Into Your Wild, or go on over to www.stepintoyourwild.com to learn more about our coaching services and wilderness academies offered through Walker's School of the Wild. Look, this is real work for real people who want to live with more clarity, more purpose, and more strength. But you don't have to figure it out alone. Let's walk this road together. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay wild.